Welcome aboard the Ferry of Knowledge. My name is Luca, and I'll be your captain tonight. As we begin our journey, find a comfortable position, somewhere you can rest, and allow the day to slowly loosen its hold. In a moment, we'll set sail together, leaving behind noise, distraction, and the weight of the waking world. Take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth as the Ferry of Knowledge quietly departs. The three fates are rarely noticed in the stories they govern. This telling follows them not as distant figures, but as the quiet structure beneath every life. From the moment a thread begins, through its measure, and into its end. It is a story about order, inevitability, and why even the gods learned to listen. Before lives could be measured, they first had to be made possible. In the earliest age, the world did not move with certainty. It shifted and strained beneath forces that were vast, ancient, and unfinished. Power existed everywhere, but direction did not. The sky, the earth, and the deep places below were shaped by struggle rather than balance, by impulse rather than design. The Titans had ruled then, immense beings born of the earth itself, embodiments of raw force. They shaped mountains by falling upon them. They split seas by warring across them. Nothing restrained them except the limits of their own strength. When the younger gods rose and order began to emerge, the world changed, but not completely. The new gods brought structure. Sky separated from earth, sea given its bounds, seasons set into motion. But even then, something remained unresolved. Power alone, even when organized, could not decide everything. Strength could rule space, but not time. Authority could command action, but not outcome. Lives still began and ended without pattern. Some burned brightly and vanished too soon. Others lingered long after their purpose had faded. Chance ruled where meaning was needed. And so, from the quiet spaces left behind by conflict, something else came into being. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as necessity. The fates were not created to govern the world. They were created to steady it. They did not emerge from desire or ambition. They arose because existence itself required limits. Without an ending, beginnings would lose their weight. Without measure, growth would lose its shape. Without sequence, nothing could truly unfold. Time needed hands, life needed form. And so, three presences took shape, not loudly, not suddenly, but with the inevitability of something that has always been required. They did not choose their role. They were their role. From the moment they came into being, the chaos of endless possibility began to narrow into paths. Lives no longer drifted without boundary. Each one was given a beginning, a span, and an ending. Not out of cruelty, but out of balance. The fates did not judge the worth of a life. They did not reward or punish. They did not care for prayer or defiance. They ensured only that everything which began would in time be completed. In doing so, they made meaning possible. Only after the world learned to endure did stories begin to matter. Only after limits existed did choice gain weight. Only after endings were certain did living become something more than motion. This was the age that made the fates necessary. And from this quiet requirement, not from war, not from joy, their work began. They did not appear as one. What was required of them could not be held by a single hand, nor understood through a single act. Time itself does not move all at once. It begins, it unfolds, and it ends. And so the power that governed it took three forms. The first was Clotho. She came into being closest to beginnings, closest to emergence. Her presence was quiet and constant, like breath taken without thought. Where a life was ready to enter the world, Clotho was already there, her hands turning the spindle, drawing a new thread into being. To her belonged the moment of arrival. She did not choose who would be born. She did not shape the nature of the life she began. She simply ensured that when a life was meant to start, it did so cleanly, completely, without hesitation. Her work was endless, for beginnings never cease. As one thread left her hands, another was already forming. Beside her stood Lachesis. If Clotho was movement, Lachesis was measure. She held the thread once it had been spun and determined its length, not by whim, not by emotion, but by a balance only she could perceive. To her belonged duration, how long a life would last, how far it would stretch across time. She did not dictate how a life would be lived. She did not decide whether it would be remembered. She decided only how much time it would be given. Some threads she measured long and steady. Others she marked short but taut with intensity. None were identical. Lachesis understood that meaning does not arise from length alone. A life brief and bright could weigh as heavily as one that endured for generations. The third was Atropos. She stood at the end. Where the thread reached its final measure, Atropos waited. She carried no anger, no mercy, no doubt. Her presence was firm and final, like a door that closes without noise. When her hand moved, the thread was cut, not torn, not destroyed, but completed. To her belonged the ending. Atropos did not act early. She did not delay. She arrived only when the measure had been fulfilled. Together, the three did not speak often. They had no need to argue or debate. Their roles did not overlap, and their purpose did not conflict. Each act depended upon the others. Without Clotho, nothing could begin. Without Lachesis, nothing could take shape. Without Atropos, nothing could truly end. They were not bound by affection, nor divided by rivalry. They were aligned by necessity. In their presence, time ceased to be endless and instead became structured. Lives moved forward rather than drifting. Choices mattered because there was a limit beyond which they could no longer be made. And though they worked without pause, without recognition, their influence touched everything, from the smallest breath to the longest reign. From this moment on, nothing that lived did so without passing, eventually, through their hands. There was a place where the work of the fates unfolded, removed from noise and spectacle. It was not hidden, but it was rarely seen, not because it lay beyond reach, but because few knew how to look for it. It existed between moments, where beginnings paused before becoming motion, and endings waited before becoming silence. Here, the fates worked. The space was quiet, not empty, but settled. No wind moved through it. No sun marked its passing. Light existed without source, steady and unchanging, revealing what needed to be seen and nothing more. The floor beneath them was smooth, worn not by footsteps, but by time itself. At the center stood the loom. It was not ornate. It bore no decoration, no symbols of power. Its presence came from use rather than appearance. Threads passed through it endlessly, each one distinct in color, thickness, and tension. Some glowed faintly, newly spun and full of potential. Others had darkened with age, carrying the weight of years already lived. Clotho's hands moved constantly. She drew new threads into being with a motion so practiced, it seemed instinctive. There was no hesitation in her work. Each thread emerged whole, unbroken, ready to pass forward. She did not pause to admire them. Beginnings were not meant to linger. Lachesis received each thread in turn. She held them carefully, stretching them between her fingers, reading them in a way no other being could. To her, a thread was not merely length, it was possibility given shape. She measured not only how long it would run, but how tightly it would be pulled, how much strain it could bear before it frayed. She adjusted nothing once her decision was made. The measure, once set, remained. Atropos waited nearby. She did not watch constantly. She did not hover. She stood apart, attentive but still, her presence marked by certainty rather than motion. When a thread reached the fullness of its measure, she did not rush. She stepped forward only when the moment was complete. Her hand moved once. The thread ended. What happened to a thread after it was cut did not concern the loom. It did not unravel. It did not vanish. It simply ceased to continue. The work of the fates was not to manage what followed, only to ensure that what had been given reached its conclusion. The fates did not look outward while they worked. They did not watch the lives attached to the threads as they unfolded. They did not observe moments of joy or suffering, not because they were unaware, but because their role did not require involvement. To intervene would be to distort the balance they maintained. The loom continued. Threads moved steadily through it, one after another, without pause or preference. Kings and shepherds passed through the same hands. Heroes and children followed the same path from beginning to measure to end. In this place, all lives were equal, not in outcome, but in process. And through this quiet, unending work, the world outside gained structure. Time became navigable. Stories gained shape. Lives, though finite, became meaningful precisely because they could be completed. This was how the fates worked. Not loudly, not visibly, but constantly and without error. As the world settled into its new shape, the gods came to know the presence of the fates. They did not meet them in triumph or challenge. There was no contest of strength, no demand for allegiance. The gods discovered the fates the way one discovers a boundary, by reaching it and finding it does not move. Zeus ruled the sky. Poseidon commanded the sea. Hades governed what lay beneath the earth. Each held dominion over realms vast and powerful. Each could alter the course of storms, split ground, or still the breath of mortals. Yet even they found that some things did not answer to command. A god could intervene in a life. A god could delay an outcome. A god could complicate a path. But no god could extend a thread beyond its measure. They learned this not through defiance, but through observation. Again and again, moments arrived that could not be prevented. A hero, protected by favor, still fell when the end came. A beloved mortal still faded when the thread reached its limit. Power could surround fate, but it could not replace it. The fates did not argue with the gods. They did not justify themselves. They did not explain their decisions. Their silence was enough. Over time, the gods adjusted. They learned where influence ended and inevitability began. They learned that to struggle against the fates was to struggle against the structure that made existence coherent. This did not make the gods lesser. It made them bound. Bound to time. Bound to sequence. Bound to consequence. When gods spoke of destiny, it was not as rulers, but as witnesses. They could see what was coming, sometimes even name it aloud. But naming did not grant control. Knowledge changed nothing once the measure was set. The fates did not belong to the gods. They were not servants, nor creations to be undone. They existed alongside divine power, steadying it, ensuring that even immortals moved within a world that progressed rather than stagnated. Without them, nothing would end. Without endings, nothing would begin again. And so the gods listened, not with reverence and not with fear, but with recognition. They understood that their own stories unfolded within the same structure as all others, that even eternity required limits to remain meaningful. From this understanding came restraint. The gods still acted. They still intervened, still favored, still punished. But when the thread reached its final length, they stepped aside, because even power must yield to completion. And it was within this quiet acceptance that the fates continued their work, unchanged, unmoved, and unchallenged, shaping the passage of every life, divine or mortal, without ever needing to announce themselves. Among the lives measured by the fates, one stood apart, not because it defied their work, but because so many attempts were made to soften what had been set. It was the life of Achilles. When his thread first passed through the hands of Clotho and Lachesis, its nature was unmistakable. It was strong, tightly spun, and already under great tension. Lachesis measured it carefully and found its length to be limited, not abruptly cut, but clearly bounded. This life was not meant to stretch quietly into age. It was shaped for intensity rather than duration. Such knowledge rarely reaches those it concerns. In this case, it reached his mother. Thetis was not mortal, and she was not unfamiliar with the deeper workings of the world. She understood that when the fates measured a life, the measure itself could not be altered. But she also understood something else. While fate set limits, it did not forbid action within them. And so she acted. She did not confront the fates. She did not plead or bargain. Instead, she tried to protect what she loved. She brought her infant son to the river that marked the boundary between life and what lay beyond it, a place whose waters touched death without belonging to it. Holding him firmly by the heel, she lowered him into the current. The water closed over his body, sealing it against harm, hardening him against wounds that would one day find others easily. But where her hand held him, the water did not reach. That small place remained unchanged, not as a flaw in fate, but as a consequence of intervention. What the fates had measured remained intact. What Thetis had done altered only the manner in which the end would eventually arrive. Achilles grew under this protection. As he trained, fought, and tested himself, the truth of his strength revealed itself again and again. Blades failed to pierce him. Blows glanced away. He moved with speed and certainty that set him apart from those around him. Victory followed him so consistently that danger began to feel theoretical rather than real. Yet the thread continued to shorten. No triumph extended it. No invulnerability reinforced it. The measure held. As Achilles matured, he came to understand the shape of his destiny more clearly than most ever do. He knew that his life offered a choice, not between life and death, but between obscurity and remembrance. He could preserve himself, remain distant from war, and allow his thread to unwind quietly. Or he could spend it fully, letting each moment carry weight, precisely because it could not be replaced. He did not hesitate long. Knowing the limits of his life did not frighten him. It focused him. He entered the path that would consume his time quickly and completely, accepting that a short life lived deliberately could carry more meaning than a long one lived cautiously. When his end came, it followed the shape that had always been present. It arrived through the one place left untouched, not because fate sought weakness, but because weakness had been introduced by love and fear, by the refusal to accept limits without resistance. The vulnerability did not contradict fate, it completed it. Atropos acted only when the thread was fully spent. Achilles' life did not fail because it ended early. It fulfilled exactly what it had been measured to be. His story revealed a truth that echoed through the work of the fates. Knowledge of destiny does not undo it, and attempts to escape it often define the path by which it is fulfilled. The thread was short, but nothing in it was wasted. And as it was removed from the loom, the pattern held steady, ready to reveal another truth, one that showed what happens when fate is not merely known, but bound to an object and placed into human hands. After the life of Achilles, another thread moved through the loom that revealed a different danger. Not the danger of resistance, but the danger of knowing too much. It was the life of Meleager. From the moment Clotho spun his thread, it unfolded smoothly, without unusual tension. Lachesis measured it with care and found that it could extend for many years. There was nothing brief or fragile about its length. This life, left to itself, would have moved steadily toward a natural completion. But alongside the thread, something else appeared. As Meleager was born, a piece of wood lay burning in the hearth. The fates spoke, not at length, and not with explanation. They stated simply that Meleager's life would endure as long as that log remained unconsumed. If the wood were reduced fully to ash, his life would end with it. This was not a warning. It was not a command. it was a condition. Meleager's mother heard these words and was filled not with understanding, but with fear. Unlike Achilles' fate, which could only be lived through choice, this fate seemed tangible. It could be held, hidden, preserved. She believed that if she could remove the object from harm, she could remove her son from danger as well. She took the log from the fire and extinguished it. In doing so, she did not change the thread. Lachesis did not return to measure it again. Atropos did not step back. The life remained exactly as it had been set. But now, its ending was tied to something outside itself, something that could be touched, moved, and feared. Meleager grew strong, capable, admired. He hunted, fought, and gained renown, unaware that his life rested on an object hidden away by another's love. He lived as though his time were open-ended, never knowing that its end had been given a shape and a location. Years passed without incident, and this was the danger. The longer the log remained hidden, the more weight it carried. Every conflict, every argument, every moment of anger now existed alongside an object that could transform emotion into finality. What had once been fate became leverage. When conflict eventually arose, as it always does, it did not arrive gently. Words were spoken that could not be withdrawn. Violence followed. In the heat of grief and rage, Meleager's mother returned to the place where the log was kept. She understood then what the fates had never needed to explain. By making fate visible, she had made it vulnerable to impulse. The log was not a shield, it was a trigger. When she placed it back into the fire, the end did not hesitate. Meleager's strength failed in exact alignment with the burning wood. As the log darkened and collapsed into ash, his life reached its measured conclusion. Atropos did not rush. She acted only when the condition had been fulfilled, when the thread had reached the end it had always possessed. The object had not shortened the life, it had only determined how the end would arrive. Meleager's story revealed a truth different from Achilles, but no less important. Fate does not always announce itself through inevitability alone. Sometimes it offers knowledge, and knowledge, when held by those who cannot bear it, becomes a weight too heavy to carry safely. What could not be changed should not have been touched. The fates did not punish interference. They did not retaliate. They allowed the structure to reveal its own consequences. When fate is placed into human hands, it does not become controllable. It becomes fragile. As Meleager's thread was removed from the loom, the pattern adjusted without disruption. And in the quiet that followed, another truth became clear. Knowing one's fate, fleeing it, or attempting to delay it are not the only responses available. Some lives would show what happens when fate is neither resisted nor controlled, but simply misunderstood and walked into unknowingly. There came a life that demonstrated what happens when fate is not resisted, but fled. It was the life of Oedipus. Before he was old enough to act, his thread had already been measured. The length was set, the end fixed in place, and the manner of it defined with unsettling clarity. The words spoken about him were precise and unbearable. He would kill his father and join his life to his mother's. Those who heard the prophecy believed that distance could undo it. Oedipus was sent away as an infant, carried from the place of his birth, and left to die where no one would claim him. But the thread did not end there. He was found, raised elsewhere, and grew believing himself the son of different parents entirely. Years later, when the prophecy reached him again, he acted as any thoughtful person might. He fled. He left the household he believed to be his own, determined never to return, convinced that movement could sever what had been spoken. Each step away from his supposed parents felt like defiance, like safety earned through distance. But the fates did not pursue him. They did not follow. They did not intervene. They allowed the thread to move exactly as it had been measured. On the road away from his home, Oedipus met a stranger. Words were exchanged. Pride met pride. Anger flared. In the struggle that followed, the stranger fell. Oedipus continued on, unaware that the act he committed in fleeing his fate had carried him directly into it. He arrived in a city burdened by questions and fear. Through wit and resolve, he freed it from its suffering. The people welcomed him. He was given honor, a throne, and a marriage that seemed both rightful and deserved. Only later did the truth surface. Piece by piece, the path became visible, not as a trap laid by cruel powers, but as a straight line walked without knowing its shape. Every choice Oedipus made had been sincere. Every effort to avoid harm had been genuine. None of it altered the measure. The fates had not deceived him. They had not concealed the truth. They had allowed knowledge and action to unfold together, proving that fate does not require force to be fulfilled. Movement alone is enough. Intention, no matter how earnest, cannot escape a structure already in place. When Oedipus finally understood, the damage was complete. The thread did not end immediately. It continued long enough for recognition, long enough for consequence, long enough for understanding to arrive fully. Only when the meaning of the life had settled into place did Atropos act. The end came not as punishment, but as closure. This thread showed that fate is not a wall that stops movement. It is a path that narrows as one walks it, and the faster one runs from it, the more directly one arrives. Of the three, Atropos was spoken of the least, not because her role was small, but because it was final. Where Clotho began and Lachesis shaped, Atropos completed. Her presence was not dramatic. It did not announce itself with fear or warning. It arrived only when there was nothing left to be decided. She did not hurry. She did not linger. Atropos did not move until the thread before her had been fully lived. Every breath that belonged to it had been taken. Every choice possible within its length had been made. Only then did her hand rise. To those who imagined the end of life as something violent or cruel, Atropos was often misunderstood. She was not destruction. She did not unravel what had been woven. She did not erase what had occurred. She ended continuation. Her action was precise, clean, silent. The thread was not torn or damaged. It was cut exactly where it was meant to end, leaving behind a completeness that required no further adjustment. Atropos did not feel satisfaction in this, nor regret. Emotion was not part of her task. Just as Clotho did not rejoice in beginnings, and Lachesis did not agonize over measure, Atropos did not grieve endings. To grieve would imply preference. To prefer would distort balance. She understood something few others did. An ending does not diminish what came before it. It defines it. Without an ending, a life would blur endlessly, its meaning stretched thin until it could no longer be held. Completion gives shape to memory. It allows stories to be told. It permits the living to understand what something was. Atropos's work made remembrance possible. When a thread was cut, it did not vanish from the world. Its influence remained. In actions taken, words spoken, paths altered by its presence. The fates did not collect these remnants. They did not preserve them. They allowed them to exist where they belonged, among those who continued living. Atropos stepped back once her task was done. She did not watch what followed. She did not linger in the aftermath. The ending was not hers to interpret. It was enough that it had occurred at the right moment. In this way, death was not an interruption. It was the final note in a sequence already complete. And through Atropos's steady hand, the world was spared endlessness. Lives were allowed to conclude. Time continued to move forward, unburdened by what should have already come to rest. This was not cruelty. It was mercy in its most impartial form. When a thread was cut, the work of the fates did not pause. There was no silence of mourning, no moment set aside for reflection. The loom continued as it always had, steady and unbroken. New threads arrived even as others were completed. Beginnings did not wait for endings to be acknowledged. This was not indifference. It was continuity. A life, once ended, no longer required attention from the fates. What followed belonged to the world beyond their work, to memory, to consequence, to the lives that had been shaped by its presence. The fates did not gather what remained. They did not weigh impact or assign meaning. Meaning arose elsewhere. For those still living, the absence left behind by a completed thread could feel vast. Spaces once filled by movement and voice became quiet. Paths once walked together were now walked alone. The world did not collapse, but it shifted, subtly, permanently. The fates allowed this shift. They did not intervene to soften it, nor did they deepen it. Loss, like life, was part of the structure they maintained. Without it, growth would have no direction. Without it, attachment would lose its gravity. The loom remained. Clotho's hands continued their motion, drawing new threads into being without interruption. Lachesis measured each one carefully, granting duration where it belonged. Atropos waited, patient and exact, for the moments that would one day require her presence again. Nothing accumulated in the space of their work. No past crowded the present. No future pressed impatiently forward. Everything existed in its proper sequence. Outside this quiet place, the world continued to turn. Children were born without knowledge of what had ended before them. Kingdoms rose and fell, unaware of how many threads had passed unseen through the same hands. Joy and suffering unfolded side by side, neither canceling the other. The fates did not look back. They did not look ahead. They worked in the now, in the precise, unrepeatable present, where a life either continued or did not. And through this unwavering attention, balance endured. Lives ended, but existence did not. Threads were removed, but the pattern held. This was the final truth the fates upheld. Nothing was meant to last forever, and nothing needed to. Completion was not failure. It was fulfillment. When a thread was removed, space was made, and into that space, life continued to arrive. As the story settles, the ancient world grows quiet once more. The places remain, even as the moment passes. Stone holds its shape. Paths rest where they have always been, worn smooth by time rather than memory. In Greek mythology, stories do not vanish when they end. They linger, not as events, but as presence. A mountain remains long after the footsteps have faded. The sea continues its slow movement, indifferent to names and outcomes alike. You can imagine the land at rest now. The palace stands silent beneath the sky. Columns catch the last light of the day before shadow returns. Courtyards empty, and the warmth stored in stone releases itself slowly into the evening air. Somewhere nearby, the sea breathes against the shore. Waves arrive without effort, then withdraw again, leaving the surface of the water smooth and dark. The horizon softens, and the line between sky and sea becomes less distinct. Time moves differently here. There is no need to follow it, no need to mark where one moment ends and another begins. The ancient world continues in its own rhythm, steady and unhurried. In these stories, gods once walked among mortals. Heroes crossed land and sea. Monsters rose and fell. And yet, what remains most constant is the stillness that follows. You might imagine a path now, not one that leads anywhere in particular, but one that simply exists. It curves gently through open land, bordered by stone and earth, familiar and unchanged. There is nothing required of you along this path, no destination to reach, no choice to make. The path continues whether you follow it or not. Above, the sky deepens. Stars appear one by one, distant and steady, placed gently into the dark. They remain unmoving, watching over land and sea alike, as they have for countless nights before this one. The world feels wide here and calm. Stories return to the places that shaped them. The sea keeps its secrets. The land holds its silence. And as everything settles back into its natural balance, there is nothing more for the story to do. It has found its place. And somewhere, beyond the edge of the land and the darkening sea, the Ferry of Knowledge continues its quiet passage, its lantern dimmed, its wake smoothing behind it, carrying stories gently